Let the weight of the day begin to fade. Wherever you are, lying still in bed, gazing at a darkened ceiling, or letting your eyes gently drift closed, this story is meant for quiet moments like these. If you enjoy calm journeys into the past, where stories drift like smoke through forgotten time, consider subscribing. Let me know when and where you're listening from. I'd love to hear. Tonight we'll wander far away from the present, to a land of sand, shadow, and sun, where the gods had animal heads, the rivers ruled all life, and the air could burn your skin. We'll be visiting a world that looks majestic in history books, but was much, much harder to survive in real life. Dim the lights, turn on a fan, settle into your softest pillow, and get ready to find out why you wouldn't last a single day in ancient Egypt. You awaken not in your familiar bed, but on a mat made of rough reeds. The air smells of dust and tannins, thick with the rising breath of the Nile. It's barely dawn, but already the world around you is stirring. There are no alarm clocks in ancient Egypt, only the call of ibis birds, the low groan of oxen, and the whispered movements of barefoot laborers who begin their day before the sun fully wakes. Your first breath is sharp, laced with the smells of stale sweat, animal dung, and drying fish. You reach up to scratch your arm, only to feel the fine layer of grit that clings to every surface. Dust is constant. It coats your skin, your hair, your teeth. No matter how often you bathe, and here, that might be only every few days, you are never truly clean. Hygiene, while valued in Egyptian culture, is limited by the tools and resources of the time. And unless you belong to a noble household or priestly class, you won't have scented oils or servant-drawn baths. You'll likely use a rough cloth, some cold water from a shared basin, and little else. Clothing is simple, but that doesn't mean it's comfortable. The linen you wear is coarse by modern standards. It clings to your body in the sweltering heat, and though it keeps some of the sun off, it does nothing to stop the insects. Flies are relentless. They buzz at your eyes, nose, and lips, feeding on the salt of your skin. In a world without screens or sprays, your only option is to swat, wave, and endure. The sun begins to rise, and with it, the heat. Egypt is not a dry desert at this time, not in the way we imagine it. The Nile floods annually, creating lush riverbanks and fertile black soil. But beyond this narrow strip of life is barren wasteland, and the heat that rolls over the floodplains can be suffocating. Your body is not used to this. You sweat constantly, and yet dehydration creeps up silently. The water you drink may come from ceramic jugs stored in cool shade, but it isn't always clean. If you're lucky, you have access to filtered or boiled water, but most likely, you're sharing from communal sources that carry disease and algae. Dysentery, parasites, and waterborne illnesses are everyday hazards. Now it's time for work, and in ancient Egypt, almost everyone works. The society runs on a tight and deeply hierarchical structure, where pharaohs reign as divine figures and commoners serve the machine of agriculture, construction, and religion. You're most likely a farmer, a laborer, or a craftsperson. And today, you'll be working outdoors. There's no shade. No gloves. No brakes. The tools are wooden and stone. You dig, you carry, you haul. Papyrus bundles are heavy when wet, and baskets of silt must be transported by hand or on your back. Your muscles ache quickly. There's no expectation of comfort. Pain is part of life. Bones break and joints wear down early. And if you complain, there is no HR department. There is only your overseer, who may beat you with a stick or lash your back with a whip for falling behind. Discipline is swift and often public. Food is earned, and it is simple. A small breakfast of bread and beer might tide you over until the midday break, if you get one. The bread is hard, often full of sand from grinding stones that wear down with time. You chew carefully, knowing each bite might chip a tooth. Beer is not the kind we know today. It's thick, warm, full of grain, and only slightly alcoholic. It's a staple drink, not a treat. Your teeth ache already. Most Egyptians suffer from severe dental problems. The sand and grit in their daily bread erodes enamel quickly, and there's no modern dental care to stop infections from setting in. Toothaches are common. So are abscesses. You might have one already, a dull, constant throb that flares when you chew. There are no antibiotics. No dentists. Maybe a local healer will offer herbs or chants, but nothing truly effective. You live with the pain until it consumes you. By midday, the heat is almost unbearable. The sun is high, casting no shadow. If you're working in the fields or on a construction site, say, hauling stones for a new tomb or wall, there's no escape. You drink what you can, but it's never enough. You grow dizzy. Sweat stings your eyes. Your skin begins to burn. Sunscreen doesn't exist. Head coverings help, but only slightly. Sunstroke is common, and for many fatal. When work finally pauses, your body is trembling with exhaustion. But rest is not restful. There is no air conditioning, no cool retreat. You sit in the shade of a palm or the mudbrick wall of your home, legs cramping, stomach still hungry. Meals are small, lentils, onions, maybe a piece of dried fish. Meat is rare unless it's a festival or offering day. Most days are just grain and whatever you can forage or trade. After dusk you return home. Your family shares a small space, perhaps a single room, maybe two if you're fortunate. There's little privacy. You sleep on mats, not beds. Insects creep in. The air smells of bodies, smoke, and rot. The latrine is a clay pot or pit outside. Sanitation is basic, and disease spreads quickly. If someone coughs, everyone gets sick. And if it's something worse, a fever, an infection, or plague, there's little you can do. Egyptian medicine is advanced for its time, but still primitive by modern standards. And then, of course, there are the gods. You must follow the rituals. Say the right words. Make offerings. If you offend the wrong deity, your misfortunes may be blamed on spiritual punishment. Superstition rules every part of life. A bad harvest? The gods are displeased. A stillborn child? Perhaps your soul was judged and found wanting. There is no concept of germ theory or genetics, only divine will and cosmic order. You fall asleep that night in the heat, your skin raw, your stomach turning, your back sore. There are no dreams, only the sound of distant drums, the murmurs of chants, and the buzz of insects. You made it through your first day in ancient Egypt. But barely. If you thought surviving the day was difficult, surviving the night is no easier. In ancient Egypt, the darkness is nearly total. There are no electric lamps to chase it away, no quiet hum of streetlights outside your window. Instead, a single flickering oil lamp throws a weak golden pool onto the wall, and the shadows stretch long and restless across the floor. The flame is fragile, fueled by castor oil or animal fat, and its scent clings to your clothing and hair. Your nose itches from the smoke, and the flame sputters when the evening wind finds its way through the cracks in your mudbrick home. The night is noisy, not with the familiar buzz of modern life, but with the sharp rustle of insects, the distant howls of desert dogs, and the murmurs of neighbors who, like you, try to rest on woven mats or straw bedding. You hear coughing nearby, harsh, deep, and unsettling. Illness moves quickly in such close quarters. There's no insulation, no soundproofing, no clean separation between life and sleep. Every cough, cry, or whispered argument seeps into your space. Rest is never truly silent. You shift on your mat, trying to find a comfortable position, but your limbs ache from labor. Your back is sore, your hands are rough with calluses, and your legs cramp from hours of squatting, standing, lifting, or walking. You have no mattress. No pillow as you know it. If you're fortunate, you have a headrest, a curved wooden stand designed to cradle the neck. To most modern people, it would feel more like a medieval torture device than a sleep aid. But here, it's a treasure, passed down through families, and believed to help keep bad dreams away. The air remains thick, unmoving. There is no fan to push it along, and opening a window invites in clouds of mosquitoes and the fine desert dust that never seems to settle. You sweat in stillness, the heat clinging to you like a second skin. In the summer months, temperatures often soar above 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius, even after sunset. The only relief comes from damp cloths or resting on cool tiles, but even these grow warm with time. As dawn creeps closer, you begin to hear the shuffling of feet again. Life in ancient Egypt starts early. Before the sun fully lifts over the horizon, people are already preparing for another day. Fires are lit. Bread is baked. Children are sent to fetch water. Women begin grinding grain, the rhythmic stone against stone sound echoing through narrow alleyways. The grindstones are simple, 2 slabs of stone, one flat and the other handheld, between which wheat is crushed into flour. This work is slow, repetitive, and physically exhausting. It often falls to women or servants, and the fine stone dust it creates fills the air and finds its way into lungs. It's no surprise that respiratory issues were common, especially among those who worked with flour or fired clay. If you're not already assigned a task by birth or trade, you'll be put to work where it's needed. Egypt's society doesn't allow idleness. Every person has a role, and social mobility is rare. Children learn their family's trade from a young age. Sons follow their fathers into farming, fishing, or craftsmanship. Daughters learn domestic duties, weaving, or work as assistants in market stalls. There is little concept of personal ambition beyond surviving, serving the gods, and ensuring your family's name continues. For the average Egyptian, there's no such thing as privacy. Homes are small and tightly packed. In urban areas like Thebes or Memphis, entire families live in cramped quarters made of sun-baked mudbrick. The walls are thick, but they do little to block out noise or heat. Furniture is sparse, perhaps a stool, a small table, and a few baskets for storage. Personal belongings are kept to a minimum. Most possessions are handmade: a chipped pottery bowl, a reed basket, a linen tunic. There are no closets, no wardrobes, no rooms to retreat into and be alone. Every movement is seen. Every sound is shared. Clothing is simple, but making it is not. Linen is the fabric of choice, made from the flax plant, which must be harvested, soaked, dried, combed, spun, and woven by hand. The process is long and labor-intensive, often taking weeks to produce even a few yards of cloth. Most people own only 1 or 2 garments. Washing clothes is done at the river's edge or in clay basins, scrubbed with ash or sand. Stains are hard to remove, and tears are common. Sewing needles are made of copper or bone, and thread is spun by hand. Every piece of clothing is precious. If your tunic is damaged, you mend it carefully, because replacing it may take months. Now it's time to eat, or try to. Meals in ancient Egypt are based on what's available, not what's desired. Bread, beer, onions, garlic, lentils, and dates make up the bulk of your diet. If you're lucky, you might have access to fish or figs. Meat is rare, reserved for feast days or religious offerings. Dairy is limited. Milk spoils quickly in the heat, and cheese is uncommon for the lower classes. Salt is a luxury, and spices are mostly for the rich. You eat with your hands, scooping food from shared bowls. Flies buzz around constantly, and you learn to ignore them or risk starving. Sanitation is a constant struggle. Waste is collected in clay pots and emptied into communal pits. Water for cleaning is scarce. Soap, as we know it, doesn't exist. Instead, people use natron, a natural salt mixture used also in mummification. It's harsh on the skin but effective at scrubbing. You're expected to clean yourself regularly, especially before participating in religious rituals. But regular doesn't mean daily. Baths are done in open courtyards or public areas. There is no privacy, and modesty is a flexible concept. Health care, such as it is, blends spiritual belief with limited practical medicine. Temples often double as healing centers, with priests acting as doctors. Remedies include honey, garlic, and crushed herbs, but also incantations, offerings, and the reading of omens. Illness is considered a punishment or sign of imbalance with the gods. A swollen eye, a fever, or a bad cough might be blamed on a curse, an evil spirit, or divine disfavor. Bleeding, poultices, and purging are common treatments. Surgery exists in the most basic forms, but without anesthesia or sterilization, it's a terrifying option. For women, life presents an extra set of challenges. Childbirth is dangerous. There are no hospitals. Deliveries happen at home, assisted by midwives and family. Complications are frequent, and maternal mortality is high. Infants, too, face grim odds. Many don't survive beyond their first year. There are few reliable ways to treat infections, and even common fevers can be fatal. Every pregnancy is a gamble, and every mother who survives is quietly celebrated. Religious observance fills every moment of life. The gods are not abstract figures, they are everywhere. You carry amulets to protect against misfortune, whisper prayers to the spirits of the dead, and leave offerings to household deities. Your calendar is built around festivals, holy days, and lunar cycles. To forget an offering or disrespect a god, even unknowingly, is believed to bring sickness, bad harvests, or family tragedy. Superstition governs daily behavior. A spilled jug might be seen as a bad omen. A dream could prompt a journey to the temple for interpretation. You must also navigate the rigid social structure. At the top is the pharaoh, believed to be a living god. Below him are priests, nobles, scribes, and military leaders. The rest of the population, craftsmen, farmers, builders, servants, and slaves, live to serve this hierarchy. If you are a commoner, your fate is largely sealed by birth. Education is a privilege. Only boys from elite families learn to read and write. Scribes hold immense power because literacy is rare and sacred. The written word is divine, and those who can wield it, through hieroglyphs and scrolls, are elevated above others. And yet there is beauty. Not in comfort, but in connection. Family bonds are strong. Traditions are respected. People find joy in storytelling, music, and the rhythm of work. Children laugh, lovers meet under palm trees, and workers sing together as they labor. Communities are tight-knit, and generosity is shared among neighbors. But for the modern person dropped into this world, these small joys would be quickly overshadowed by the hardship, discomfort, and overwhelming demands of simply staying alive. The day ends not with rest, but with ritual. You thank the gods, light incense if you have it, and whisper a prayer for protection through the night. You lie down again on your mat, listening to the desert winds whisper through the reed roofs, wondering if you'll be strong enough to do it all again tomorrow. In ancient Egypt, surviving the day is an achievement in itself. And for someone from the modern world, with your soft hands, sensitive stomach, and love of air conditioning, the odds are slim. Imagine stepping outside again after the short relief of dusk, not to rest, but to resume your duties. The rhythm of ancient Egyptian life never truly halts. There are offerings to place, errands to run, tools to prepare for the next day, and prayers that must be said beneath the stars. You might have assumed that life would slow down once the sun set. But here, in the shadow of the temples, life is just as active at night. People rise early and sleep late, and every moment in between is dictated by responsibilities to your household, your work, and the unseen forces that hover just beyond the reach of firelight. The moon, when visible, casts a milky sheen across the village rooftops. But when the sky is clouded or the crescent is thin, the dark is deep and unsettling. You hold a small clay oil lamp in your hand, its handle warm, the flame unsteady. You use it to navigate narrow alleys paved with compacted earth, your sandals scraping over broken stone. Along the way, you pass families gathering on stoops, women washing children with clay jars of warm water, and the occasional temple worker in ceremonial linen headed toward the precinct of the gods. The stillness is deceptive. 1,000 small things still move, geckos darting along walls, cats prowling for scraps, insects chittering in the brush. As you near the temple complex, the air changes. It smells of incense, charred offerings, and something older, stone, dust, and sanctity. The temples are immense, even in their incomplete state. These are not places of gentle comfort but of awe. They rise from the earth like mountains carved by willpower alone, their columns painted in bold reds, ochres, and deep blue. Images of falcon-headed gods and divine pharaohs watch you with stern eyes. The closer you get, the quieter everyone becomes. Even laborers bow their heads as they pass. These temples are not simply houses of worship, they are the axis of the world, where the divine and human meet. But you are not here to marvel. You are here to serve. Perhaps you are tasked with cleaning the courtyard, removing bird droppings and wind-blown debris from the altars. Perhaps you carry clay jars of water to fill basins for ritual purification. Or perhaps you are delivering grain or linen to the priesthood as part of your community's obligation. Nothing is free in Egypt. Even piety comes with a cost. The priesthood is a world unto itself. Highly trained, mostly drawn from noble families, the priests of Egypt hold immense power, spiritual and political. They shave their bodies daily, purify themselves with repeated washings, and wear only the cleanest linen. Their duties are endless, feeding the gods through elaborate offerings, performing chants, anointing statues with sacred oils, and interpreting omens. The gods do not speak directly, at least not to commoners. Their will is filtered through these intermediaries, who carry their own agendas and rivalries. A priest's blessing can raise your status. His disfavor can destroy it. But priests are human too. Behind the grand facades and solemn rituals are whispers of corruption. Some skim from offerings. Others manipulate rituals for political ends. If you're a laborer or minor assistant in the temple system, you learn quickly to stay quiet, keep your head down, and never question the hierarchy. Punishments for sacrilege can be severe, ranging from expulsion to mutilation or worse. And sacrilege doesn't have to be intentional. Step into a forbidden chamber, mispronounce a sacred name, or wear the wrong linen, and you might be marked as cursed. Your role here is brief, but exhausting. The weight of sacredness presses on your shoulders like a stone. Every move must be deliberate. Every word must be humble. Even if you don't believe, even if you question the gods in your private thoughts, you must perform devotion outwardly. Religion in Egypt is not a private matter. It is everywhere, stitched into daily life like thread into cloth. It is in the amulet tied around your neck, in the bread shaped like the eye of Horus, in the stories told to children and the blessings whispered over graves. There is no separation between the sacred and the mundane. Everything is divine, and therefore everything is a potential danger. You finish your errand and return home, the night thick around you. Sleep comes late, as always, and when morning returns, it brings not just light but fire. The Egyptian sun does not wake you gently. It sears across the land like a punishment. Your skin, unaccustomed to such constant exposure, begins to show signs of wear. Redness, peeling, cracks along the knuckles. If you are fair-skinned, the damage is even worse. Sunburn is not understood here as it is today. It's simply a part of life. Skin becomes leathery by middle age. Scars are common. You watch older workers and see how bent they are, how their hands tremble, how their eyes squint constantly from years of staring into brightness. If your job involves work on the river, the challenges are different but no less difficult. The Nile is a source of life, and of many small, constant miseries. Fishing is done with nets or spears, often from narrow reed boats that tip easily. The river is full of life, but also of hazards. There are crocodiles in the southern stretches, and hippos known to overturn boats and crush men with ease. Parasites thrive in the warm waters. Wading in to retrieve fish or gather lotus stems can mean a slow infection that creeps through the skin and into the bloodstream. There is no cure, only worsening symptoms and eventual collapse. Silt gathers under your fingernails. Mosquitoes swarm your ankles. And the smell, a mix of wet vegetation, rotting fish, and warm mud, never truly leaves you. Even after washing, it clings. Some people say the Nile has its own spirit, and if you anger it, your nets will return empty or your foot will find a hidden sharp stone. Superstition once again overlays the physical world like a second skin. There are rituals to perform before fishing, offerings to make, words to avoid saying. Break the rules, even unknowingly, and misfortune will follow. Back on land, taxes must be paid. And not in coins, because Egypt is still largely a barter and goods-based economy. Instead, you owe the state a portion of your harvest, or of your labor. Scribes arrive with scrolls and styluses, recording every measurement, every yield, every jar of oil. They have the power to alter your standing with a stroke. If they say your field underproduced, you owe more, even if it was the Nile's poor flooding that caused the shortfall. Bribes are common. Appeals are rare. Justice, if it exists, moves slowly and only for the privileged. You feel a tooth begin to ache again. A deep, throbbing pain that radiates toward your ear. There is no relief. No aspirin. No numbing gel. Perhaps you can chew on a clove or rinse with wine, if you can find any. But mostly you endure. Egyptian skeletons studied by modern archaeologists show extreme dental wear and abscesses. Many people lived with constant oral pain. Infection often spread to the jaw or bloodstream. And yet life carried on. There was no other choice. You pass a marketplace, loud with voices, the air hot with bodies and animals. Donkeys bray, traders shout, chickens scurry across stone. Baskets of onions, dates, lentils, and fish are laid out in the sun. Flies swarm everything. A scribe passes by, fanning himself with a woven palm leaf. Children weave between legs. A woman slaps a thief's hand away from her stall. Everyone watches, but no one intervenes. Small thefts are common, and punishable if caught. Later in the day, you help carry a neighbor's body to a simple grave site. Death is constant here, and not always mourned with tears. It is expected. Accepted. But burial is sacred, and must be done properly. The body is wrapped, washed, and laid to rest with small offerings, a jar of beer, a piece of bread, a trinket to comfort the soul. If the family is poor, there is no full mummification. Just prayer, wrapping, and hope. But even this is expensive, and sometimes debts go unpaid so that proper rites can be performed. You return home as the sun begins to set. Your body is filthy. Your feet are blistered. You are hungry again, but there is little to eat. And even as you close your eyes on another exhausting day, your sleep is uneasy. You know that tomorrow will be no different. That the sun will rise again. That the demands of survival will continue. That the sacred and the suffering are always intertwined. In ancient Egypt, the world is beautiful only from a distance. Up close, it is relentless. By now, you've realized that ancient Egypt is not just a place of temples and tombs, but a civilization held together by a rigid and often unforgiving social structure. It is a world where your position is determined the moment you are born. Your status, your labor, your education, even your burial, all are dictated by your class. There are no shortcuts to privilege, no ladders to climb unless you are one of the rare few who can read and write. And for someone dropped into this world from the modern age, this lack of social mobility is more than frustrating, it's suffocating. You begin the day not with choice, but with duty. There is no, "What would I like to do today?" There is only, "What must I do to survive?" If you are a farmer, you rise before dawn to tend your fields. If you are a craftsman, you pick up your tools and begin the same repetitive motions you've performed every day for years. If you are a servant, you await orders from those who live in greater comfort than you, preparing food you will not taste, washing linens you will never own. And if you are enslaved, a fate often inflicted upon prisoners of war or the children of debtors, you are not even considered a person in the legal sense. You are property, and your suffering does not register on the scales of divine justice. You live under the ever-present eye of the Pharaoh, not in the literal sense, but in the way society constantly reminds you of your place in relation to him. His image is carved into every stone wall, painted onto every temple pylon, etched into your mind by repetition and ritual. He is not simply a king. He is divine. The living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, the keeper of Maat, the balance of the universe. When he breathes, the crops grow. When he speaks, the gods listen. And when he dies, an entire nation mourns not just a man, but the temporary dimming of divine order itself. But what does this mean for you, a humble laborer in his sprawling kingdom? It means taxes. Endless obligations. You must surrender a portion of your grain, your fish, your cattle, or your time, always in service to the state, always in tribute to the gods. The government is not a distant force. It is embedded in every level of life, from the village elder who oversees disputes to the tax collector who visits your home with a scroll and a calculating stare. If you cannot pay, you may be conscripted to labor, to build a canal, to haul stone for a tomb, to serve in a military expedition where you do not even know the language of the enemy. There is no escape. Only endurance. And yet, for those who dwell in the upper echelons of society, the world is startlingly different. The scribes, those few who have mastered the sacred art of hieroglyphs and the more practical script of hieratic, are the gatekeepers of knowledge. They record laws, measure taxes, write letters for the illiterate, compose hymns to the gods. They do not sweat in the fields. Their hands are ink-stained, not calloused. They wear finer linen, eat more flavorful food, and walk with a different posture, the confidence of someone whose words can shape the world around them. To become a scribe, however, is not simply a matter of will. It requires access to education, to mentorship, to resources. Most are sons of scribes or officials. You might begin your training at age 5, scratching characters into shards of pottery. By your teens, you're copying sacred texts onto papyrus. And if you prove yourself skilled, you may serve in a temple, an administrative office, or even the court of the pharaoh himself. It is one of the few paths to power in Egypt, and it is guarded jealously. Then there are the nobles, the priests, the landowners. Their homes are larger, sometimes with multiple rooms, private gardens, and even stone columns. Their floors are plastered and painted. Their servants grind their grain, pour their wine, fan them in the heat. Their children play with ivory toys while yours scavenge for beetles. Their concerns are political, ceremonial, or spiritual, not whether their next meal will come. They are buried in tombs with painted walls and carved coffins. You, if you are lucky, will be wrapped in a simple shroud and buried in the desert sands. And yet, despite their power, even the elites are bound by expectations. A nobleman must host feasts, support temples, and navigate court intrigue. A priest must remain ritually pure, lest he risk angering the gods. A court official may rise high, but one misstep, one rumor of treason, one failed prophecy, and he may find himself disgraced, exiled, or worse. Egypt is not a place of individualism. It is a machine, vast, ancient, and unyielding. Everyone, from the pharaoh to the fisherman, is a cog in that machine. One day, you witness a royal procession, or perhaps you are part of the crowd, forced to pause your work and kneel as the pharaoh's litter passes by. Trumpets sound. Incense fills the air. Soldiers clear the path. Slaves scatter lotus petals in the dust. The pharaoh appears, his face calm beneath a golden headdress, his kilt starched and brilliant in the sun. You glimpse him only for a moment, but it is enough. Enough to understand that he does not live in the same world as you. His body is perfumed, his sandals gilded, his mind concerned with matters you cannot imagine. To him, your life is a number in a column, a shadow on a temple wall, a name scratched on a burial list, if that. You return to your home unsettled. The display was beautiful, yes. Grand. Moving even. But it also revealed the vast chasm between your life and his. You carry your own water. He drinks from lapis-encrusted goblets. You sweat under linen that chafes your skin. He is shaded by ostrich feather fans. You bury your loved ones in the earth. He builds pyramids. And yet, somehow, despite this divide, the system endures. You do not rebel, not because you lack awareness, but because rebellion is inconceivable. The idea that the world could be different, that the pharaoh is not divine, that the gods are not watching, that the social order could be overturned, is simply not part of your mental vocabulary. The stories you are told from childhood reinforce the wisdom of tradition. The myths celebrate obedience. The rituals reward conformity. Even when the system is unjust, it is sacred. And so you endure. As the sun sets again, you reflect on your place in this world. You are neither noble nor priest. You will never write scrolls or walk in procession. You will never leave your village, most likely. Your name may not survive your grandchildren. But you are still part of something vast. Something ancient. And there is a strange comfort in that. a sense of belonging that transcends your suffering. But for someone from the modern age, used to freedom, choice, privacy, and justice, the weight of this system would crush you. Not because it is violent, but because it is inescapable. To truly understand why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt, you must also walk for a moment in the sandals of its women, not the queens or priestesses who gaze calmly from carved reliefs, but the countless ordinary women who labored, loved, and endured in silence. Their lives were governed by different expectations, shaped by biology, tradition, and the ever-watchful eyes of neighbors. In this world, a woman's body was both sacred and burdened. Her worth was measured not just by what she did, but by whom she bore and how she served. And from the moment she could carry water or knead bread, she was expected to contribute, invisibly, steadily, without complaint. You are a girl again, perhaps no older than 5 or 6, learning from your mother how to grind grain between 2 stones. She teaches you with gestures, not books. There is no formal education waiting for you. No scrolls, no ink. Only repetition. You practice kneading dough, weaving baskets, sweeping floors with palm fronds. You watch her mix natron into jars for washing, learn to recognize the hiss of a cracked clay pot before it breaks completely, and memorize the rhythm of heating a cooking fire without letting the smoke choke the room. Your dolls are made of sticks or clay. Your games are moments snatched between chores. And even in play, you imitate what you see, tending to toy children, preparing imaginary meals, covering tiny faces in mock burials. By the time you're 12, your childhood is essentially over. Menstruation marks a transition that is not celebrated but expected. You are now a woman in the eyes of the community, and that means readiness for marriage. There are no long courtships, no dreams of adventure. Marriage in ancient Egypt is practical, often arranged, and conducted with little fanfare. A contract might be drawn up if the families are literate or wealthy, but for most, it's simply a matter of agreement and cohabitation. Dowries are exchanged, clothing, cooking tools, perhaps a small piece of land. And from that day forward, your labor serves a new household, your husband's. If you're fortunate, your husband is kind and your mother-in-law not too cruel. But kindness is not guaranteed, and cruelty is not forbidden. There are no police officers to report to, no shelters to escape to. Disputes are handled privately or not at all. If your husband is wealthy or a scribe, you may find yourself restricted to the home more than a woman married to a farmer, not out of reverence, but because your movements are more tightly watched. Respectable women do not wander without purpose. They do not laugh too loudly. They do not argue. In a land that worships goddesses yet restrains its daughters, contradiction is a daily truth. Your days are full, and endlessly repetitive. At dawn, you rise before your husband and children. You begin by fetching water from the communal well or the edge of the Nile, carried in heavy clay jugs balanced on your hip or head. The path is dusty, the jugs slippery with dew or sweat. You share this task with other women, exchanging hushed greetings and quiet complaints. Then home again, to light the fire, prepare breakfast, sweep the courtyard, wash the youngest children, and mend clothing torn the day before. There is always something to do. Linen must be scrubbed on stones, meals prepared with ingredients that spoil quickly in the heat. Bread must be baked daily, not the soft, airy kind you know today, but dense loaves that often contain bits of grit or sand from the grindstone. Your hands become raw from kneading and pounding. Your back aches from leaning over clay ovens or stooping to gather kindling. And still, the work is never done. Childbirth looms constantly over your life. There is no escaping it. With few options for prevention, pregnancy is as frequent as it is dangerous. Each child you bear brings new risks, not only to your health, but to your place in the household. A woman who cannot produce children, especially sons, is vulnerable to divorce or replacement. A woman who dies in childbirth becomes a sad inevitability, mourned briefly, and then replaced. The midwives who assist you rely on experience, not sterilization. There is no anesthesia, no surgical intervention. You may give birth squatting on bricks or leaning on a wooden frame, surrounded by women, praying not to tear or bleed too much. After birth, your responsibilities only grow. You must nurse the infant while tending to your other children, still perform your daily labor, still prepare meals, still keep the household clean. The baby may cry through the night, but there is no relief. Your sleep is fragmented, shallow. Illness can strike at any moment, a fever, a cough, an infection. You use herbs if you have them, poultices if you were taught how to make them. But the gods are your only real doctors. You offer them prayers, amulets, sacrifices. If the child dies, you mourn. Briefly. Then you continue. Your identity is not your own. You are wife of, mother of, daughter of. Your name may not be recorded anywhere, unless you come from a family of means or marry into temple service. Even then, your image may be depicted behind your husband's on a stela or tomb wall, smaller in scale, eyes lowered in reverence. You are expected to be modest, obedient, resourceful. You may be deeply loved by your family, but you are rarely asked what you desire. Some women do rise higher, as musicians, dancers, or priestesses, especially in temples dedicated to Hathor or Isis. These roles come with honor and a degree of autonomy. But they are the exception, not the rule. And even they must submit to the authority of male priests or temple officials. A woman's power, when it exists, is often linked to her fertility, her voice and rituals, or her connection to the gods. It is not political. It is not personal. It is conditional. In moments of quiet, rare as they are, you might sit by the fire, weaving or shelling beans, humming a lullaby you once heard from your own mother. You might look up at the stars and wonder what lies beyond the village walls. You might hear a story from a traveling merchant about lands where women rule, or write, or speak freely, and though you doubt it, a part of you dares to believe. But then the fire needs tending, the child begins to cry, and the spell is broken. As you age, your body bears the story of your labor. Your hands grow thick with calluses. Your joints swell. Your skin darkens from sun and smoke. If you are fortunate enough to live beyond 40, an impressive feat in this era, you may be respected as a matron. Your daughters will care for you as you once cared for your mother. But there is no retirement. No rest. You continue to work, advise, mend, and grieve. The cycle continues. In death, if your family can afford it, you will be wrapped in linen and buried beside your husband. A small figurine may be placed with you, a shabdi, meant to serve you in the afterlife. Your name might be spoken during prayers for the dead. Your memory might linger in your children's rituals. But eventually, the world will forget. The dust will cover your tomb, or your bones will be disturbed by flood or conquest. And still, life will go on. For a modern woman, used to rights, choices, education, and autonomy, ancient Egypt would not be a mystical escape, but a cage. Not because the people were cruel, but because the system was designed to function without ever asking her what she wanted. And so, another day ends. The linen is folded. The children are quiet. The stars return. And beneath them, women sleep, their dreams, if they have any, silenced by exhaustion. It begins again, this time with no illusion of novelty. The Nile glistens in the distance like a mirage under the rising sun, but even before it crests the horizon, the heat presses against your body like a weighted cloth. Ancient Egypt was not a land of endless desert, not entirely. Its heart pulsed with life along the river, where fields of grain, papyrus, and date palms thrived in the black silt left behind by the annual flood. But when the water receded and the planting season began, the days stretched long and blistering. You do not awaken refreshed, no one does. You awaken because the heat demands it. Today, you are one of the many conscripted laborers summoned to serve the state. The term sounds noble. Serving the pharaoh, offering one's strength to the gods. But make no mistake, this is forced labor. You are not paid in coin. Perhaps you are fed, perhaps not. You are not here because you chose to be. You are here because the village quota had to be met, and your family could not bribe their way out of it. So you walk, feet blistered from yesterday, shoulders already sore, toward the site where hundreds of men and boys are gathering. It might be a new temple rising from the desert rock, or an expansion of a noble's tomb. Or, most daunting of all, a royal monument, a colossus or mortuary complex meant to immortalize a pharaoh's name. These projects are constant. Egypt is always building, always preparing for eternity. You pass an overseer with a staff in hand, his eyes sharp beneath a wide-brimmed headcloth. He does not yell. He doesn't have to. The sting of his staff is well known. The tools are crude. Bronze chisels, stone mallets, wooden sledges, baskets woven from reeds. There are no pulleys. No steel. No machines to move the massive stone blocks that must be carved, dragged, and aligned. Everything is powered by muscle and coordination. Your job today might be to carry loads of debris from one side of the site to the other, or to mix mortar by foot in shallow pits, or to climb makeshift ramps with buckets of crushed limestone for polishing the walls. Whatever the task, it will be brutal. Your linen kilt sticks to your thighs. Dust coats your arms. Sweat stings your eyes before the sun is fully high. You squint upward at the massive statues beginning to form, faces still rough, arms outstretched, expressions frozen in eternal calm. The gods or the pharaohs, sometimes they are one and the same. Their likenesses will be taller than any home, carved into the landscape as reminders of permanence. You cannot imagine such power. You cannot imagine being remembered like that. There are shouts. A block being hauled by a crew of 30 men has slipped from its rope and cracked upon the ramp. The overseer strikes 2 of them with his staff before ordering the work redone. The block must be hauled again. There is no room for failure. There is no tolerance for accidents. If someone is injured, a broken foot, a shattered finger, he is pulled to the side and replaced. Perhaps a poultice will be offered. Perhaps not. If the injury is bad enough, he may be left at the base of the hill until he can hobble back to the village at nightfall. You are given a mid-morning drink, thick beer, cloudy and sour, served from a communal jug. It dulls the thirst but not the exhaustion. Sometimes, a bit of bread or dried fish is handed out. Not enough to satisfy, only enough to continue. The work resumes, the sun now overhead. Shadows disappear. The stones bake in place. You wrap your head to avoid burning your scalp, but the linen is soaked through quickly. You have never known heat like this. It is not merely temperature, it is a presence. It presses into your skull. It swells your fingers. It becomes the only thing you can think about. The walls of the temple rise around you, covered in early sketches drawn in red ochre. Later, these will be painted in vivid color, gods with the heads of falcons and jackals, sacred boats, floating across stars, the pharaoh offering incense to Are. But for now, they are rough outlines. You don't need to understand the stories to know your place in them. You are the one holding the basket, the one bent beneath the yoke. You are the nameless figure in the background of history, carved over, painted around, erased with time. There are moments of rhythm, lifting, stepping, dumping, returning, that allow your thoughts to drift. You think of your home, of your children if you have any, of the quiet fields along the Nile. Perhaps you are a farmer by trade, forced to leave your crops behind during this period of labor. You worry about pests, about theft, about whether the grain will be enough to feed your family and pay the next tax. These thoughts never leave you. Even here, surrounded by monuments and sacred intentions, survival is still your first concern. The work continues into late afternoon. Your arms shake with fatigue. Your mouth is dry. When the day finally ends, you are released with the others, not with ceremony, but with a grunt and a gesture. You are expected to return tomorrow. No one asks how you are. No one provides a ride home. You walk in silence, feet dragging through the sand, past statues that stare blankly at the sky. You pass a shrine on your way, a small alcove in a wall where offerings have been left. Bread, flowers, a cup of water. You stop for a moment, bow your head, and whisper a prayer. Not to a great god like Ammonius or Osiris, but perhaps to a local deity, a household spirit, someone small and close who might still hear you. You ask for strength, or for the pain to be less tomorrow, or for a breeze, however slight. At home, the pain fully arrives. Muscles scream. Blisters break. You soak your feet if you have water left. You eat what little you can find, lentils, onions, maybe a scrap of goat meat if the household is fortunate. The children are loud. The room is stifling. You want sleep, but your body burns. The stone dust is in your nose, your ears, under your fingernails. You feel it in your dreams. And tomorrow, you must go again. Some laborers die during these state assignments. They collapse from heat stroke, or are crushed beneath stones. Their names are recorded if they were important. More often, they are not. You might be buried at the edge of the construction site, or sent home on a cart, your body stiff from the sun. But not all of this labor is in vain. There is pride, too, in the construction of eternity. When the monument is complete, your descendants may point to it and say, "My grandfather helped build that wall." Even if your name is never carved into it, your sweat becomes part of its stone. And that, for many, is the closest thing to immortality. But for someone from the modern world, used to machinery, rest days, safety protocols, and cold water, a single shift of divine labor would break you. Not because you are weak, but because this system was never designed with your comfort in mind. It was designed for permanence. And permanence, here, is paid for in flesh. As the sun rises again, golden and pitiless, you feel it before you see it. The aching weight behind your eyes, the heaviness in your limbs, and the bitter taste in your mouth. Something is wrong. Your stomach twists. A creeping fever simmers beneath your skin. You are sick, and in ancient Egypt, that is a perilous state to be in. Illness is an accepted part of life in this world. It is not rare or shocking. It is woven into the rhythms of the day like grinding grain or hauling water. A cough here. A swollen eye there. Someone always limps. Someone always sweats through the night. To be unwell is not a crisis, it is an expectation. But that does not make it any easier to endure. You try to go about your duties. There is no such thing as a sick day. The temple work, the household chores, the field labor, they do not pause just because your legs tremble or your head swims. You walk slowly, dragging your feet, your hand pressed to your stomach. Others glance at you but say nothing. Perhaps they're afraid of catching what you have. Perhaps they've seen too many sick people to care anymore. Either way, you are alone with your pain. There are healers, of course, both practical and spiritual. If you live in a village, a local woman might know how to grind garlic and honey into a poultice. She might offer you a drink made from fig tree bark or rub your back with castor oil. If your family can afford it, you may visit a temple where a priest-physician prescribes spells alongside herbs. In ancient Egypt, medicine is a blend of faith and empiricism. For every salve or compress, there is a charm. For every brew of crushed dates and palm wine, there is an incantation whispered to the gods. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts, offers hundreds of remedies for stomach pain, for toothaches, for infected wounds. But most of these cures are based on observation rather than science. You might be told to place a dead mouse on your sore spot, or to swallow ground crocodile dung mixed with beer, or to recite a prayer to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of disease and healing, while applying goose fat to your chest. You obey, not because you believe in every remedy, but because there is nothing else to do. The fever worsens. Your joints throb. Sleep becomes fractured, full of strange dreams. You wake in the night to the sound of chanting from a nearby home. Someone else has fallen ill. Or someone has died. It's hard to tell which. Death visits often here, not always suddenly, but always certainly. Malaria, dysentery, tetanus, tuberculosis. Infections from a simple scratch. Contaminated water. Spoiled food. Childbirth. So many ways for the body to fail. And so few ways to restore it. And yet, for all its suffering, death is not feared in ancient Egypt the way it might be in your world. It is not an end, it is a passage. The focus is not on how you die, but on how well you prepare for what comes after. The real concern is whether your soul will be ready. Whether you have left your body in a state that can survive the trials of the Duat, the underworld. You begin to wonder, as you lie on your mat, if this illness will pass. If not, what will become of your body? Will your family be able to afford the rites? Full mummification is reserved for the wealthy, a long, expensive process involving resins, linen, natron, and sacred oils. But even the poor deserve to be buried with care. A small ceremony, a shroud, an offering or two. Your spirit, or Ka, needs these things. Otherwise, it may wander, restless and forgotten. If your illness deepens, a priest might be summoned to read from the Book of the Dead, a scroll of protective spells and directions for the afterlife. You may not understand the words, but their rhythm is comforting. You imagine your heart being weighed against the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance. If your heart is heavier, burdened by guilt or wrongdoing, it will be devoured by Ammit, the crocodile lion hippo beast. If it is light, you will pass on to the field of reeds, a paradise that looks much like the Nile Valley, only cleaner, kinder, and free of pain. You try to remember. Did you treat others fairly? Did you steal? Did you harm the sacred animals like cats or ibis birds? Were you faithful to your family? You cannot read or write, but you know the commandments, the negative confessions taught to every child. I did not lie. I did not curse the gods. I did not hoard grain. I did not cause pain. You whisper them to yourself, just in case. The next day, your fever breaks. Perhaps the charm worked. Perhaps your body simply endured. Either way, you are grateful. You are weak, but alive. You rise slowly, bathe with what water you can find, and rejoin the world. No one offers congratulations. There are no flowers, no get-well cards. But your neighbor leaves a handful of figs by your door. That is enough. Not everyone is so lucky. Later that week, a child dies. You see the family carrying a small wrapped bundle out into the fields. The father walks ahead, silent. The mother follows, head covered. A few women walk with them, singing low songs. The child will be buried with a doll and a piece of bread. The priest will mark the spot with a prayer. Life will go on. And yet, in this harsh system, the dead are not forgotten. Egypt builds for them, carves for them, paints entire walls with their names and images. The tombs of even modest citizens are decorated with scenes of daily life, fishing, farming, embracing loved ones, so the soul may remember what it once had. The belief is not in escaping death, but in preserving what was good in life. A familiar meal, a warm breeze, a moment of laughter. You see now how death shapes everything here. It is not morbid. It is constant. It is the foundation of this civilization. Every laborer who hauls stone for a tomb. Every painter who mixes pigments from crushed ochre and malachite. Every priest who memorizes the rituals of embalming. All are part of this immense, communal effort to cheat oblivion. Not with immortality, but with memory. It's said that to speak a person's name is to make them live again. That is why names are carved so carefully, why tomb robbers are feared not only for their theft, but for the spiritual erasure they cause. If your name is lost, your soul cannot find its way. If your likeness is destroyed, your ba, the part of your spirit that travels between worlds, becomes confused. The worst fate is not death. It is to be forgotten. You think about that as you walk past the necropolis on the edge of the village. Rows of small mud-brick tombs, some crumbling, some freshly painted. Offerings placed at the entrances, beer, bread, flowers. Children dart between the graves. Life and death are neighbors here. One does not end where the other begins. In modern times, illness is met with hospitals, medicine, machines that beep and monitor. But here, in ancient Egypt, you meet sickness with ritual, herbs, and patience. Death comes without sirens. It is not the end, but a bend in the river. And yet, for someone like you, who fears discomfort, who expects medicine to work, who is used to soft beds and sterile rooms, the first sign of fever would bring panic. The lack of treatment options, the nearness of death, the need to keep working through it all, it would be too much. Because in ancient Egypt, the world keeps spinning. The Nile keeps flowing. The gods do not pause their gaze. And your survival depends not on cure, but on endurance. Before the first golden light touches the palm fronds outside your home, your body is already awake, not because of a clock or alarm, but from hunger. A dull, persistent ache, familiar and quiet. In ancient Egypt, even on good days, your belly is never quite full. Not for long. Food is not taken for granted. It is worked for, grown, ground, fetched, prepared, protected. It is the first thought in the morning and the last worry at night. And though Egypt is blessed with a rich river and fertile soil, the bounty of the land is unevenly shared. You know this intimately. You start your day with a thin piece of bread and a gulp of beer, the Egyptian breakfast for those who cannot afford dates or figs. The bread is not the soft, fluffy kind you know. It is dense, flat, darkened by ash and often filled with grit. Grit from the millstones that grind the grain, sand and stone dust that wears away your teeth slowly, meal after meal. Archaeologists, thousands of years later, will study your jaw and see the proof: enamel worn down to the nerves, abscesses left untreated, infections that spread quietly. You chew carefully, not because you want to savor the flavor, but to avoid pain. Beer in Egypt is not an indulgence. It is survival. Thick, cloudy, and low in alcohol, it is closer to a porridge than a beverage. Brewed from partially baked barley loaves, it contains bits of grain, wild yeast, and sediment. It nourishes, fills, and hydrates. And it is drunk by everyone: men, women, children. Water, though abundant, is not always safe. It comes from the Nile or public wells and is often laced with silt, bacteria, or parasites. Boiling is uncommon. Filtering rudimentary. A single careless drink can cause weeks of discomfort, or worse. Your day is shaped by the search for more food. You don't own a field, but your family might rent a small patch of farmland from a landowner or temple. The soil is rich, black and thick with nutrients from the annual flood, but the yield is never guaranteed. A poor flood season can ruin the harvest. Too much water, and the seeds rot. Too little, and they dry in place. You plant barley, wheat, onions, garlic. You gather reeds and herbs. You hunt if you're lucky, birds caught in nets, fish pulled from the shallows. Farming is backbreaking. You work barefoot, knee-deep in mud, the sun already high, your muscles trembling from the effort of dragging the plow or bending to plant. Tools are basic: wooden sticks, flint blades, baskets. You are bent nearly double all day. There are no gloves, no knee pads, no protective clothing. Your skin burns. Your back knots. Insects bite without pause. And yet, the work must be done. Because without the harvest, there is no bread. And without bread, there is no life. At home, the cooking begins early. Fires are coaxed to life with dry palm leaves and dung. The smoke stings your eyes and soaks into your clothing. The clay oven must be fed constantly to maintain its heat. Too low and the bread does not rise. Too high and it burns. You grind grain using a saddle quern, a heavy stone pushed back and forth over another. It takes hours to produce a small amount of flour. Your shoulders ache. Your fingers swell. You cough from the fine powder that rises as you work. But there is no shortcut. This is how it has always been done. Lunch is meager. Lentils, maybe some onions stewed in water, served in clay bowls. If it's a festival day, there might be fish, dried and salted, or even a sliver of goose. But for most of the year, meat is rare. Livestock are expensive, and slaughtering one is a luxury, usually reserved for weddings, religious ceremonies, or major temple events. You cannot waste even a bone. Fruits are seasonal. Dates, figs, pomegranates, sweet moments, when available. You dry what you can, store what you must. Spoilage is constant. There is no refrigeration. Clay jars are sealed with mud, stored in shaded corners, and watched closely for signs of rot or pests. Weevils in the grain. Mold on the bread. Flies on everything. Still, there are moments of pleasure. A ripe melon shared among family. Fresh cucumbers sliced into water. A handful of honeycomb gifted from a neighbor. You savor these without ceremony. There is no abundance. Only luck. In the market, Food is exchanged, not shopped for. Barter is the currency. A basket of garlic might be traded for a piece of linen. A jar of beer for a reed mat. Coins exist in Egypt's later periods, but daily life is not built around them. You rely on memory, reputation, and the fairness of the seller. Arguments break out often. Who owes what? What is spoiled? Who tried to cheat whom? Women are often responsible for shopping, walking to the market in the morning with baskets slung over their arms, babies at their hip. They haggle, inspect, taste. They speak sharply, but with familiarity. They know which vendor has the freshest herbs, which has been watering down their beer. They watch each other, too, knowing that food is not just sustenance, but status. A woman seen buying extra oil might be whispered about. Is there a feast coming? Is her husband being honored? Is she showing off? At night, the final meal is cooked. More bread. A small stew. A porridge of lentils or peas. You eat sitting on mats, in a circle, with your family. You eat with your hands. There are no utensils. No napkins. Just fingers and mouths and clay bowls. The meal is quiet. Everyone is tired. There are no dessert courses, no tablecloths, no separate plates. You eat until the food is gone. Not until you are full. That rarely happens. If guests are present, they are served first. This is etiquette, even among the poor. You offer water, a cloth to wipe their hands, the best portion of the food you have. Hospitality is sacred. A guest brings the presence of the gods. To treat them poorly is to bring shame to your house. Children are taught not to waste. They eat every grain, every crumb. Food dropped on the ground is picked up, dusted off, eaten anyway. Nothing is thrown away lightly. The gods are always watching. Waste is seen as disrespect. And yet, for all this effort, food still runs out. There are seasons of hunger. After a bad flood, during an infestation, when taxes are high and grain is seized for temple offerings. Then you eat less. Or not at all. You grind acacia seeds, chew on roots, beg from neighbors. Your body grows thin. Your skin dry. You wake from dreams of food, the smell of roasting goose, the softness of sweet bread, only to find another empty bowl. For the wealthy, things are different. They eat well, richly, daily. Multiple dishes at each meal. Wine, not beer. Meat, fruit, honey. They dine from faience bowls and silver spoons. Their food is cooked by servants, their beer filtered, their wine aged in sealed amphorae. They recline as they eat, fanned by young attendants. They listen to music as they chew. Their dogs are fed better than your children. You may serve them. You may see their waste and feel it burn in your stomach. But you do not complain. There is no changing your station, only enduring it. And for someone from the modern world, where food is packaged, cleaned, labeled, and ready, where hunger is rare and choice is abundant, this way of living would be shocking. The labor, the scarcity, the taste, the constant tension between need and reality. Because in ancient Egypt, every bite is a victory, every full bowl a blessing, and every crumb a reminder that survival is never guaranteed. In the world of ancient Egypt, order is not simply preferred, it is sacred. It is the very foundation upon which all existence rests. The people call it Ma'at, a concept that means balance, truth, justice, and cosmic harmony. To live outside of Ma'at is to invite chaos, and chaos is not just a disruption, it is death, darkness, and destruction. Every day, you are expected to live within this structure, to follow its rules not only in public but in private, in word and deed and thought. From the moment you rise, every action is part of this balance. There is no such thing as routine habit. Even the way you speak, walk, and wash is laced with expectation. You rise with the sun, just as the god Ra does, beginning his journey across the sky. You greet the day with silence or with whispered prayers. You wash your face and hands if you have water. Purity is not just physical, it is spiritual. Filth is seen as more than unpleasant, it is offensive to the divine. You know which side of the door to step through first. You avoid speaking certain words before breakfast. You teach your children to listen to omens, a twitch in the eye, a strange dream, a visit from a particular bird. All of these might carry meaning. A single misstep, an argument, a broken jar, a bad omen, could sour your entire day. And if things go wrong, if the oven cracks, if your child falls ill, you will look back and wonder, what did I do to disrupt Ma'at? The state reinforces this worldview with endless rituals. At temples, the priests begin their day with dozens of purifications before even entering the inner sanctum. Offerings are made to the gods at precise times, in precise quantities, with precise gestures. If anything is done incorrectly, the process begins again. You, as an ordinary citizen, may never enter the holiest rooms, but you hear the chants carried on the breeze, smell the incense drifting through narrow alleys, feel the tremble of the sistrum, the sacred rattle, vibrating the very air. Every temple is a reflection of the universe. The inner sanctum is the world center, where the god lives in statue form. The columns are lotus stems. The ceiling, painted with stars, mirrors the sky. When you enter the outer courts to make an offering, a loaf of bread, a small bowl of beer, a clay figurine, you are participating in a cosmic drama. The gods are not distant in Egypt. They are immediate, present in every shadow and stone. At home, you have your own rituals. You place household gods, like Bes, the protector of families, or Tauret, the hippopotamus-shaped goddess of childbirth, near the bed. You burn incense, recite prayers, and whisper blessings over food. Every part of your life is watched over. Every illness is a message. Every fortune, a reward for obedience. But obedience is complicated. Egypt's laws are not codified in the way modern societies expect. There is no scroll of laws available to the public. Instead, justice is interpreted by local officials, by elders, by scribes. If you are wronged, you may bring a complaint to a local magistrate or village headman. But whether justice is served depends on your status, your reputation, and your ability to offer a small gift. Bribery is not seen as corruption, it is the grease that moves the wheels of society. If you are accused, punishment is swift. For minor offenses, stealing grain, damaging property, slandering a neighbor, you may be fined, beaten, or forced to labor. For more serious crimes, blasphemy, striking a priest, tampering with a tomb, the consequences are severe: exile, mutilation, or death. But worse than any physical punishment is erasure. To have your name scraped from a wall, your image destroyed, your body denied proper burial. This is the ultimate punishment in Egypt, the severing of your soul's path to eternity. You live with the constant knowledge that your behavior is not just a matter of survival but of cosmic consequence. Children are raised with this understanding. They are taught to obey not just their parents but the gods, the spirits of ancestors, and the moral order of the world. A child who lies may be told that the god Thoth, Lord of Writing and Truth, is watching. A child who steals might be warned that their heart will be too heavy to pass into the afterlife. Discipline is spiritual as well as social. Even speech is governed. The Egyptians believed that words hold power, that to say something aloud is to bring it closer to reality. Gossip is dangerous. Curses, even whispered, are taken seriously. There are rituals for breaking the power of a bad word, rituals that involve spitting, burning papyrus, or burying amulets. You learn to speak carefully, especially about death, illness, or the pharaoh. The pharaoh, of course, is the supreme enforcer of Ma'at. His role is not merely to rule, but to maintain cosmic order. He makes offerings on behalf of the entire nation. He commissions temples not just to glorify himself, but to please the gods and ensure the flooding of the Nile. If the floods are poor, the people do not blame nature. They wonder, has the pharaoh offended the gods? Have we, through our failure to live rightly, unbalanced the world? Festivals help restore that balance. Several times a year, the village transforms into a place of celebration. Processions wind through the streets. Sacred statues are carried in gilded boats. Music fills the air, drums, flutes, chants. Bread and beer are distributed to the people. Children dance. Women decorate their hair with lotus blossoms. And for a moment, the burdens of life lift. But even festivals have rules. You must attend if called. You must not touch the sacred statue unless you are permitted. You must behave joyfully, even if you are tired, grieving, or ill. To show sorrow during a festival is to insult the gods. So you smile, you clap, you sing, and you carry your exhaustion like another offering. Your home life, too, is governed by quiet rituals. You sweep the floor each morning, not just to clear dust, but to chase out evil spirits. You wear charms on a string around your neck. You leave breadcrumbs at the threshold for wandering souls. When a neighbor dies, you cover mirrors, light a lamp, and leave a jug of water near their grave so the soul will not thirst. Everything matters. Every motion. Every moment. And yet, despite this structure, chaos still comes. Floods fail. Crops rot. Children die. In those moments, you may question Maat. You may wonder if the gods are angry or absent. But the priests will tell you, the system still works. The problem lies in your heart. In your actions. In your failure to give enough. To say enough. To believe enough. You carry this weight. And you pass it on. For someone from the modern world, where laws are written, choices are open, and the divine is often distant, this constant spiritual responsibility would be overwhelming. The pressure to live correctly in every detail, the fear of cosmic punishment for a careless word or forgotten ritual, it would exhaust you. Because in ancient Egypt, life is not lived for the moment. It is lived in preparation for judgment. And every breath is a line in the story of your soul. When you imagine the past, you may conjure visions of palaces, painted walls, and golden artifacts. And yes, such things existed in ancient Egypt, but not for you. Not for the laborers who filled the granaries or dug irrigation canals. Not for the potters, the fishermen, or the women who spent their days grinding grain and mending baskets. For them, for you, home was not a sanctuary. It was shelter, and nothing more. Your house is made of mudbrick, formed from Nile silt and straw, baked hard in the sun. The walls are thick enough to block the wind, but they do little against the relentless heat. The roof, made of palm trunks and woven reeds, sags slightly in the middle. It creaks at night. It leaks in the rare desert rain. You repair it often, gathering reeds, patching holes with mud. The work is tedious and temporary. But it is necessary. A failing roof lets in dust. And in Egypt, the dust is constant. You have no glass windows. Just small square openings near the ceiling, covered with lattice or left open. Light comes in sparingly, and with it, flies. There are no doors as you know them. Just hanging cloth, or perhaps a wooden plank pushed across the entryway at night. There is no lock. No privacy. Anyone may enter, family, neighbors, animals. You grow accustomed to it. To the noise. To the shared spaces. To the fact that your life is never truly your own. Inside, the floors are compacted earth. If your family is well off, perhaps the surface is plastered with lime or smooth clay. But there are no carpets. No cushions. You sit on mats woven from reeds, sometimes softened with scraps of linen. You sleep on the same. If you are lucky, you have a low headrest carved from wood or alabaster. But there is no pillow. No mattress. No softness. There is one main room, shared by all. If you are fortunate, a second room or a rooftop space offers extra sleeping quarters. But most families live and sleep in the same area. You wake with others. You sleep beside them. You hear their dreams, their coughs, their prayers. There is no separation between parent and child, between sibling and spouse. Modesty is a shifting concept. Space is a privilege. Cooking is done in the courtyard or on a small hearth inside. The fire must be managed carefully. Too much smoke, and the room becomes unbreathable. Too little, and the meal is undercooked. You collect dung for fuel, animal waste mixed with straw, dried into cakes, stacked in a corner. The smell is familiar. Not pleasant, but not unexpected. You cannot afford to waste anything. Every crumb of bread, Every drop of oil, every coal of heat matters. Water is stored in ceramic jugs, cooled by evaporation. You collect it from wells, from the river, from communal basins. The jars are heavy. They break easily. When one shatters, it must be replaced, and that may take time, or trade. You learn to carry carefully, to step lightly, to value the sound of water sloshing gently behind your shoulder. Sanitation is rudimentary. If your household is well organized, you have a clay pot tucked into a corner, emptied daily into a pit behind the house. In towns, there may be shared latrines or canals dug for waste. But the system is crude. The air inside your home carries the scent of sweat, smoke, animals, and rot. You grow used to it. Your nose forgets what fresh air smells like. There are no lamps, just small oil lights made of clay. Their flame is weak and flickering, and the oil leaves a sticky residue on your fingers. At night, the house is dim, shadows long and uneasy. You move slowly, hands outstretched. You know the placement of every jar, every mat, every low bench. A misstep means pain. A broken pot means cost. You have no decorations. Or if you do, they are simple: a lotus blossom drawn onto a plaster wall, a string of beads hung from a peg, a figurine placed on a shelf, not for beauty, but for protection. Amulets, charms, and household gods are more important than artistry. You pray not for luxury, but for survival. And yet this is home. In its own way, it offers comfort, not through its objects, but through its people. Your children play in the dust outside, their laughter rising above the clatter of donkeys and the calls of merchants. Your spouse sits nearby, mending a garment, humming softly. A neighbor stops by to exchange a handful of herbs for a broken spindle. A cousin brings news from the next village. Stories are shared. Songs are sung. Not loudly, but often. The home is a place of work as much as rest. If you are a weaver, your loom stands in the corner, strings stretched taut. If you are a potter, clay is shaped and fired in the courtyard. If you grind grain, the corn is worn smooth from daily use. Every household task is visible. There is no after hours. There is no distinction between public and private. Your life unfolds in full view. Even intimacy, between spouses, between parents and children, is shaped by this openness. There are no locked doors, no whispered secrets. You learn to be quiet, to be brief, to be discreet. Or you don't. And no one seems to mind. Illness spreads easily in these tight spaces. If one person coughs, soon all do. Flies swarm the mouths of infants and the eyes of the elderly. You sweat constantly. You rinse what you can. You keep ashes near the entrance to sprinkle on spills and waste. But you cannot keep disease away. You only hope it passes quickly. Still, you take pride in your home. You sweep it each morning. You smear the cracks in the wall with fresh mud after a storm. You draw simple patterns near the door to invite good fortune. You teach your children to respect the space, to greet the spirits when they pass through, to speak softly at night. And you know that compared to others, you are lucky. There are those who sleep in the streets, under awnings of palm fiber, beside ovens and granaries. Those who lost their homes to fire or flood. Those who serve in noble households and sleep at the foot of someone else's bed. You have four walls, a roof, a space to sit, a place to cook. It is enough. But for someone from the modern world, with your climate control, your running water, your privacy and insulation and shelves full of comforts, this house would feel like a prison. Too small, too hot, too loud, too close. You would long for silence, for solitude, for space to stretch your limbs. But there is none. Because in ancient Egypt, life is not lived alone. It is lived in layers. In noise. In dust. In breath shared by many. And comfort is not what you sit on, but who you sit with. From the moment the first rooster crows and the ibis birds begin their awkward, high-pitched squawks along the riverbank, you are reminded that silence is not a gift found in ancient Egypt. The sounds of life are everywhere, layered, constant, and inescapable. The peaceful hush of a quiet morning simply doesn't exist in this world. There is no insulation between yourself and the sounds that accompany labor, survival, and prayer. If your modern ears are used to walls that muffle voices and machines that hum in a gentle, controlled rhythm, you are in for a rude awakening. Ancient Egypt is alive with human noise, animal noise, ritual noise, domestic noise, and the music of chaos, all of which fill the air from sunrise until long after the stars have risen. It begins with footsteps, bare feet slapping against dry earth. The sound of clay water jars being lifted from doorways. The rhythmic grind of the cornstones, mothers and daughters pushing grain back and forth between slabs of limestone, early enough that the flour dust still floats in golden beams of light. A donkey brays just beyond your wall. A child cries in a neighboring home. Someone is already yelling, not in anger, but with the force of someone trying to be heard over everything else. The entire village, whether it is a quiet riverside settlement or a densely packed workers' camp, awakens not with a gentle stir but with a full, vocal surge. The animals contribute generously to the daily chorus. Chickens dart underfoot, clucking and flapping. Dogs bark, not always out of aggression, but from excitement or hunger or irritation. In the fields, oxen grunt as they are harnessed to wooden plows. In towns, donkeys bray and bleat as carts creak over uneven roads, their hooves striking hard against stone. Goats bleat from alleys. Cattle move from behind courtyards. The air smells like dung and hay, and it carries with it the constant bleating and breathing of animals who live not outside your neighborhood, but inside your home space. They are not pets. They are not silent. And their sounds follow you into every task. Commerce brings another layer of noise. Merchants set up in dusty alleyways or market courtyards, laying out jars of beer, baskets of garlic, clay pots, and dried fish on mats. Their voices rise in practice chants, not just advertising, but insistence. Each item is described with care, and the merits of each batch of barley or each freshly baked loaf are extolled loudly, repeatedly. Buyers don't simply select and pay. They inspect, question, argue, trade, and complain. Every exchange is vocal. There are no price tags. No silence. You are expected to speak your way into a deal. Even bartering for onions can take several rounds of spirited back and forth. If you try to avoid conversation, you'll be passed over or cheated. Meanwhile, the scribes sit in shaded corners, not entirely removed from the noise but elevated just enough to command authority within it. Their styluses scratch softly over parchment and shards of pottery, but even their work is punctuated by command. They read aloud what they've written. They call out lists of names, quantities of grain, days of labor owed. The bureaucracy of Egypt runs on spoken word as much as written record, and every official transaction comes with voices raised for confirmation and witnesses. There is no such thing as quietly filing paperwork in ancient Egypt. The paperwork shouts your name as it records it. And then, rising above the ordinary, is the ever-present sound of devotion. This is not a quiet religion. The temples, whether massive complexes in urban centers or small village shrines carved into rock, pulse with ceremonial sound. Priests chant hymns in measured tones. Incantations echo off stone walls. Sacred instruments like the sistrum shake with a metallic rattle, mimicking the movement of divine energy. The prayers are not whispered. They are recited aloud, rhythmically, like poetry meant to summon the god's attention. During festivals, the sounds expand into full orchestration: drums, flutes, tambourines, choirs. You feel them in your chest as much as you hear them in your ears. Ceremonial processions are even louder. Imagine walking through the streets during the festival of Opet in Thebes. Hundreds gather to carry the sacred bark of Ammonius from Karnak to Luxor temple. Horns blast. The crowd chants. Perfumed smoke wafts thick in the heat. Every step is measured by drumbeats. Children dance, priests shout instructions, nobles cheer and sing, and commoners follow in waves of chanting and song. Even if you stand silently in the crowd, the noise surrounds you like water. There is no part of it you can shut out. You are swept up in the vibration of it. In funerals, the volume does not recede, it shifts in tone. Grief in Egypt is a vocal thing. Mourners wail. Professional lamenters are hired to cry aloud, sometimes dramatically pulling at their hair and throwing dust on their heads to express anguish. They moan the name of the deceased repeatedly so that the soul will not forget itself on the journey to the underworld. In some regions, neighbors come to shout blessings, not out of celebration, but to ensure the spirit's safe passage. Death is not met with solemn silence. It is escorted out with full, noisy force. And then there's the domestic world, the sounds you cannot escape even inside your own home. Children play loudly, often imitating the adults they watch. They pretend to shout about taxes or mimic priests performing rituals. They yell across rooms, laugh without restraint, and cry when scolded. There is no expectation of quiet play. Adults argue openly, without stepping outside. If a couple has a disagreement, the entire household hears it. If a parent disciplines a child, the slap of a hand or the raised voice carries through the courtyard and over the wall. No one pretends these moments are private. There is music in the home too, songs sung while working, lullabies murmured to babies, rhythmic clapping while preparing food. Women sing as they weave, or hum as they clean. Workers chant in sync as they lift stone or turn soil. Music is not reserved for leisure. It is sown into labor. The rhythm keeps tasks moving. The sound keeps spirits lifted, or at least focused. If you are new to this world, the constant chorus might feel invasive. You will crave silence. But you will not find it. Even at night, when the sun sets and the shadows lengthen, the world does not hush. The dogs begin barking more. The crickets and frogs along the river start their chirping. The occasional donkey brays in protest against the dark. Inside the home, people murmur prayers, retell stories, sort tools, whisper family matters. There are always footsteps, coughs, snoring, the shifting of bodies on mats. If someone in the house is ill, you hear their moans in the dark. If someone gives birth, you hear the women gather, the commands issued in half-hushed voices. Even dreams are shared, recounted in the morning, interpreted by elders, retold with weight. There is no such thing as background noise in ancient Egypt. Everything is foreground. Every sound is distinct and unfiltered. The walls do not block. The streets do not muffle. The earth itself seems to vibrate with activity. Sound defines place, signals mood, marks time. A quiet space would be seen not as peaceful, but unsettling. An absence of sound might signal death, danger, or disfavor from the gods. People expect noise. They listen for it. They rely on it. And yet, for someone like you, used to closing a door and finding stillness, to slipping in earbuds and escaping into curated silence, this would be a torment. There are no noise-canceling devices here. No insulation. No solitary time carved out for reflection. Even in temples, even in tombs, even in your own home, you are never truly alone with your thoughts. The world presses against your ears every moment of every day. In modern life, silence is seen as a luxury, a sign of control and privilege. But here, it is suspicious. Here, the world speaks constantly, and you are expected to speak with it. To shout your prayers. To sing your work. To weep your grief. To barter your meals. To live out loud. And so, as another evening folds over the Nile, and the stars begin to blink gently above, you sit beside a small clay lamp in the corner of your home and wonder, not when the noise will stop, but how you ever thought it might. Because in ancient Egypt, life is sound, and silence does not exist. If you woke up one morning in ancient Egypt as a child, the world would feel vast, vivid, and immediate. But it would not feel safe. Childhood in this ancient land was not defined by playrooms or school bells or cushioned landings. It was defined by work, responsibility, observation, and survival. Children were deeply loved and often cherished by their families, but their lives unfolded in an environment that made no special allowances for their youth. In ancient Egypt, a child was not a fragile creature to be protected from the world. They were a small version of the adult they would soon become, expected to participate, to endure, to contribute. You would begin your life not with doctors or delivery rooms, but in the corner of your family's home, on a mat of reeds or packed straw, assisted by women from the village who had attended many births before. If you survived that birth, and many did not, you would be wrapped in linen, pressed against your mother's body, and nursed for as long as your family could afford to spare her time. There were no bottles, no formula, no sterilized water. You lived on her milk and her strength alone, while she returned to work days or even hours after delivering you. Your cradle, if you had one, was a basket. More likely, you spent your infancy swaddled on the floor, beside a water jar or between two clay ovens. You were always near someone's feet. Diseases were everywhere. Childhood mortality was high, incredibly high, and parents knew this with quiet dread. The Nile's generous waters carried more than silt and fish. They carried parasites and bacteria, spread by hands, flies, and animals. A simple fever could end a child's life. A cough that lingered for too many days. A small wound that became infected. There were no vaccines, no antibiotics. You were protected by prayers, amulets, and maternal instinct. But not by medicine. Still you played. Children in ancient Egypt found joy where they could. You had dolls made from clay, carved wood, or bundled linen. You played with carved hippos, boats that floated in puddles, small balls woven from papyrus. Some toys were painted. Others were crude. You learned to imitate your elders, pretending to grind grain, sweep the floor, draw on broken pottery shards with a reed dipped in water. But playtime was fleeting. By the time you could walk, you were expected to carry, to fetch, to help. Little boys helped their fathers in the fields, watched them mend tools, followed them to the river to fish. Little girls stood beside their mothers, grinding flour, shaping dough, weaving, and sweeping the home. There was little separation between work and play. There was only life, immediate and constant. You watched, learned, copied. You didn't need books. You needed hands, eyes, and obedience. And you were everywhere, not tucked behind gates or inside schools. Children roamed freely, barefoot and mostly naked, until they reached adolescence. The youngest among you wore nothing at all in the hot seasons. Some children had protective amulets tied around their necks, often in the shape of the god Bes, who scared away evil spirits with his wild face and protruding tongue. Others wore small charms shaped like frogs, scarabs, or the eye of Horus. They were not decorations. They were armor, invisible shields in a dangerous world. There were no formal schools for most. Education was a luxury for the few, the children of scribes, priests, and nobility. If you were among that small percentage, you began your studies early, seated on the floor of a temple or household office, learning to copy characters onto broken pottery or scraps of discarded papyrus. You learned by repetition, not exploration. Your teacher held a stick. Mistakes were corrected quickly and physically. You were not encouraged to ask questions. You were expected to remember, recite, and endure. But if you were like most children, you learned by doing. You learned when to plant by watching the moon. You learned how to carry water without spilling. How to tell when bread was ready by the sound of it. You learned which reeds were sharp and which could be woven. How to avoid snakes. How to chase a goat without falling into the irrigation canal. You knew the names of gods not from study, but from hearing them muttered over cuts, crops, and cook fires. The world was your teacher, sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel. Discipline was not deferred. Children were corrected with stern words, swift hands, or sharp looks. Elders did not explain. They instructed. And you listened, because the consequences of disobedience were swift. There were no courts for children. No counselors. No timeouts. There was only the rhythm of survival, and the need to be useful. By the age of 7 or 8, you were considered more than a child. You could carry a basket, tend a fire, feed animals. You might be sent to watch younger siblings or work alongside older cousins. You helped harvest. You helped grind. You helped carry the burdens of the household. The line between child and adult blurred early. There was no ceremony, just expectation. And yet families loved their children deeply. There are countless letters from worried fathers to distant sons, paintings of mothers embracing toddlers, statuettes of little ones with round cheeks and chubby fingers. Children were a source of joy, laughter, and pride. They were also a source of anxiety. Would they survive the next summer? Would they grow strong? Would they be blessed or cursed? Entire rituals were performed to protect them. Offerings made. Protective spells spoken before sleep. Names chosen with care, often invoking divine favor or spiritual power. As a child, your identity was shaped by your family's needs. You didn't ask, "What do I want to be?" You lived what you were born into. If your father was a fisherman, so were you. If your mother wove mats, you learned her patterns. There was no ladder to climb, no distant goal. Just the season ahead, the work that needed doing, and the hope that you would live long enough to become the adult you were already practicing to be. Adolescence brought change, particularly for girls. Puberty marked the end of childhood, often formally, even if quietly. A girl who began to menstruate was now a woman, and within a few short years she might be married, sometimes as young as 13 or 14. Marriage wasn't always a grand affair. It was a practical arrangement. A new household. A shift in duties. A new chapter of labor and, soon, motherhood. Boys continued in their father's trades, or, if they were lucky, gained apprenticeship in temples or workshops. They might be sent away to learn a craft, masonry, pottery, metalwork. Others might join the military in their later teens, serving the pharaoh in distant lands, their families watching the road for signs of return. Few children grew up untouched by death. Siblings were often lost. Friends disappeared suddenly. Parents mourned without pause. In paintings, tombs often show scenes of large families, not always because families were that large, but because so many children were born to replace the ones who were lost too soon. Grief was a daily thread, woven into lullabies, into bedtime prayers, into the way mothers held their babies tighter at night. And yet joy survived. Children laughed. They danced in festivals, smeared their faces with ochre and mud, made tiny boats out of reeds to float in puddles. They sang songs while gathering sticks. They played catch with pebbles. They raced through fields, oblivious for a moment to the heat and the hardship. And in those moments, ancient Egypt smiled. But for a child from the modern world, raised with protection, structure, padded corners, and filtered water, ancient Egypt would feel not just difficult, but unkind. You would cry out for your parents in the night, and be told to sleep. You would fall and bleed and be handed a scrap of linen, not a bandage. You would be expected to carry, to contribute, to obey, and to do so with silence. There would be no cartoons, no toys with labels, no gentle explanations. Only the world, pressing in around you, telling you what to do. Because in ancient Egypt, children were not hidden from the weight of life. They were born into it. You might imagine that in a world so bound by work, ritual, and survival, leisure would be scarce or reserved only for the elite. But ancient Egypt, for all its structure and demands, was not devoid of joy. In fact, the people found many ways to laugh, to gather, to rest, and to celebrate. The challenge, of course, was that leisure looked very different from what you might know today. There were no weekends. No screens to stare into. No headphones to drown out the world. No holidays booked months in advance. Entertainment was not escape. It was woven into daily life, fleeting, tactile, loud, and communal. And for someone from the modern world, used to entertainment as convenience, comfort, and solitude, the pleasures of ancient Egypt might feel more like work than rest. Your day off, if it can even be called that, doesn't come on a regular schedule. It arrives based on agricultural rhythms or religious calendars. When the fields are flooded, and labor is impossible, there may be time to visit friends, repair tools, or gather in town. During temple festivals, daily work pauses briefly to allow the community to observe and participate. These are your breaks, measured not in hours of peace, but in shifting responsibilities. Even in leisure, you are expected to show up, to offer thanks, to contribute to the spirit of the moment. If you are a child, leisure comes easiest. You find games where you can. You might chase scarabs in the dust or climb onto a clay ledge and leap into piles of chaff. You play tug-of-war with reed ropes, balance on one foot, or throw stones into a circle scratched in the dirt. Your toys are simple: carved figures, clay animals, rag dolls. Most are made by someone in your family or handed down. There are no shelves lined with variety. You have what you have, and you use it until it breaks. Adults, too, have games, though more often these are for specific occasions. One of the most well-known is Senet, a board game played with flat pieces and casting sticks. It isn't just for fun, it carries spiritual meaning, symbolizing the soul's journey through the afterlife. Still, it offers real competition, strategy, and laughter. Friends gather around low tables or smooth patches of stone, leaning in as they plan moves and block opponents. The game is serious, but the conversation that flows around it is light. Gossip is shared. Songs are hummed. Bread is broken between turns. Music plays a central role in Egyptian leisure. It is not a performance you passively observe, it is something you are part of. Most homes have some form of musical instrument, even if rudimentary: a lute, a flute, a drum, or a lyre. Children bang on pots. Women clap and sing as they grind grain or sweep. Traveling musicians bring energy to marketplaces and festivals, plucking strings and blowing flutes carved from reeds. Music is made communally, for weddings, births, harvest celebrations, and funerals. There are professional musicians in larger towns, often women, trained to perform for nobility or during temple processions. But among commoners, music belongs to everyone. If you are near the river, you may fish for pleasure as well as food. Some afternoons, families gather on the banks of the Nile with nets, baskets, and patience. They sit in the shade of palms, telling stories, watching the ripples, hoping for fish to dart into the shallows. Children splash at the edge. The air smells of mud and warm grass. It is peaceful, but always tinged with practicality. No one comes here simply to relax. Everything must have a purpose, even rest. You fish because you can eat. You gather reeds while you wait. You braid rope. The moment is beautiful, but never empty. Dancing is perhaps the most expressive of Egyptian entertainments. During weddings, banquets, and religious festivals, dancers, often young women, perform elaborate movements set to rhythm and chant. Their bodies are adorned with beads and linen sashes. Their feet move in smooth, practiced patterns. But dancing is not limited to professionals. In rural villages, everyone dances. Movement is joy. It rises from the hips and shoulders, arms waving, feet stomping, sweat flying. No one watches quietly. Onlookers clap, shout encouragement, sing. You dance not to impress, but to connect, with the crowd, with the gods, with the rhythm of the moment. Food becomes entertainment on special days, too. During festivals, the ordinary diet of lentils and coarse bread is replaced, even briefly, with roasted meats, dried fruits, and sweetened cakes. You might drink wine instead of beer, or add honey to your porridge. These are not everyday meals. They are celebratory and rare. And when they happen, they are savored. You eat with your hands, sitting shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, laughing, talking, reaching across bowls to tear bread, dip into sauces, sip from shared jars. The pleasure is not just in the taste but in the togetherness. Storytelling is perhaps the most common and beloved form of leisure. When the sun begins to set and the village slows, people gather around fires or inside cool courtyards. Someone begins to speak, slowly at first, then with rising energy. They recount the deeds of gods, the follies of foolish kings, the cleverness of animals. They tell of a crocodile who became a judge, of a slave who tricked his master, of a man who sailed into the sky on a reed boat. The stories are well known but always fresh. Each teller brings their own twist. Children listen wide-eyed. Adults chuckle at favorite lines. You do not need scrolls or books. The story lives in the voice. But not all entertainment is innocent. Some involves risk, wrestling matches, stick fighting, athletic games where injury is possible. Young men challenge one another in fields, testing strength and balance. These contests are physical, often rowdy, and occasionally violent. But they are also respected. A man who excels may win admiration, even offers of employment or marriage. Among the nobility, hunting is both a pastime and a symbol of dominance. Chariots dash through reeds. Arrows fly. But for commoners, such experiences are rare. Your sport is simpler, throwing sticks at targets, racing barefoot, climbing palm trees to snatch dates from the highest branch. And still, many evenings are spent in quiet domestic leisure. A grandmother weaving baskets beside a sleeping dog. A group of women shelling beans and trading advice. A boy carving a toy from scrap wood as his father mends a tool. These are not dramatic moments. They are slow, repetitive, filled with gesture and rhythm. They are the heartbeat of leisure in Egypt, quiet productivity that soothes the mind after a day of harder labor. There is no entertainment in isolation. You do not retreat to your room to scroll through images or lose yourself in a show. There is no room to retreat to. No device. No script. Your entertainment is social, shared, and physical. You participate, even if you're just listening. You are always part of the audience and the stage at once. And if you are weary, truly weary, you may seek solitude at the edge of the fields, along a quiet irrigation canal, or beneath a tamarisk tree. You sit with your thoughts, perhaps with a small flute or a basket to mend. You breathe in the heat, listen to the frogs, watch the sun dip behind the village rooftops. It is a moment of quiet, but not silence. The world hums around you. For someone from the modern world, this way of resting would be unfamiliar. There is no anonymity in leisure. No scrolling alone, no tuning out. You cannot hide. You cannot disappear into a podcast or a playlist. Every moment is public, shared, active. Even joy is a responsibility. You are expected to show up, sing, dance, eat, clap. You are not entertained. You are entertaining. Because in ancient Egypt, joy is not something you consume. It is something you do. As you go about your daily life in ancient Egypt, hauling water, sweeping courtyards, preparing bread, mending baskets, you might be forgiven for thinking that the labor ends with your final breath. But it does not. In this world, death is not rest. It is transition. And what awaits beyond that transition is not quiet nothingness or peaceful release. It is a mirror of life itself, another world filled with rules, work, order, and the ever-present requirement to be prepared. The Egyptians believe in the afterlife with such intensity that the dead are often treated with more care, reverence, and long-term planning than the living. And as you begin to understand this layered reality, you'll realize that even in death, you are expected to serve. This belief isn't fear-based. It is structured, methodical, and steeped in optimism, but also anxiety. Your death, in this society, is not simply an ending. It is a journey that must be navigated carefully. Your soul will split into parts. The Ka, your vital life force, remains near your tomb and must be sustained with offerings. The Ba, your personality or soul bird, must fly between worlds, visiting the living and reporting back to your spirit. And finally, your shadow, your name, and your heart all hold pieces of who you are, and they, too, must be preserved. If even one part is neglected, your eternity is incomplete. Which is why, long before death, the work of dying begins. If you are fortunate, or at least thoughtful, you begin preparing for your afterlife years in advance. Tombs are not just graves, they are homes for the soul. Their walls are painted with everything you loved in life: gardens, banquets, boats, perfumes, musical performances, fields of grain. The belief is not that you will merely rest in paradise, but that you will continue to live, harvesting, eating, socializing, and worshipping the gods. The trick is to bring everything with you. And since you cannot carry tools and food into the afterlife by hand, you create representations. Painted walls, carved figures, inscribed prayers, each a substitute that ensures your soul has what it needs. For the wealthy, these preparations become grand. Stone tombs carved with elaborate hieroglyphs. Coffins layered in gold and lacquer. Rows of shabby figurines, small servant statues, stacked like soldiers along the tomb wall, each ready to take your place when work is required in the next world. Because yes, there is labor in the afterlife. The field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise, is not a dreamland of lounging and leisure. It is farmland. Eternal farmland. You are expected to plow, plant, and harvest for the gods as you did on earth. The difference is that now, if you have prepared correctly, your Shabdas will do it for you. But if you are poor or unlucky, or die without warning, you may not have any of these preparations. You may be buried in a shallow grave wrapped in simple cloth. Your name may not be inscribed on a stela. You may be remembered for a generation or two, but without offerings and prayers, your ka will wither. The soul, in Egyptian belief, must be fed. Food and drink are not symbolic. The soul draws sustenance from the scent and spirit of real offerings. Without them, it becomes hungry, wandering, forgotten. This is why families continue to bring food to tombs for years after death. Bread, beer, fruit, meat, whatever can be spared. These offerings are sometimes eaten after being presented, sometimes left to decay. It is not about the physical food, it is about the act. The prayer. The remembrance. A son who fails to offer to his father's ka is not just negligent, he endangers the soul's peace. So death becomes not just a matter for the dead, but for the living. The afterlife is a shared responsibility, carried by memory, ritual, and repetition. And then there is the trial, the famous judgment in the Hall of Two Truths. The moment your soul arrives in the next world, it is greeted not by soft clouds or music, but by scales. Your heart is placed on one side. A feather, the symbol of Ma'at, is placed on the other. If your heart is heavy, with greed, dishonesty, cruelty, it outweighs the feather. In that case, you are devoured by Ammit, the soul eater. Not punished, not tortured, just erased. Gone forever. If your heart is balanced, you pass on. But getting to this moment requires more than good deeds. It requires proper burial, correct rituals, protective amulets, and most importantly, the Book of the Dead. This book is not a single manuscript, but a collection of spells written on papyrus or painted on tomb walls. These spells help you navigate the dangers of the Duat, the underworld. There are gates, guardians, rivers of fire, and questions to answer. Without the right spells, you will be lost. You might be forced to walk upside down, or attacked by serpents, or trapped in darkness. So the living prepare scrolls for the dead, personalizing them with the name of the deceased. The more spells, the better. But spells cost money. Ink, papyrus, scribes. So again, the poor must rely on oral traditions or generic formulas. And again, the soul of a poor man must work harder than the soul of a rich one. Even your body, in death, must be maintained. The process of mummification is long, delicate, and sacred. The organs are removed and placed in jars, each guarded by a different deity. The heart is sometimes left in place, sometimes removed and replaced by a scarab amulet. The brain is pulled out through the nose and discarded. The body is packed with natron, dried, then wrapped in hundreds of linen strips. Amulets are tucked between layers. Spells are recited. Oils are applied. If done properly, your body becomes a vessel, recognizable to your soul. If it decays, your soul may become confused, disoriented, even angry. But again, this treatment is rare. It is expensive. Most people cannot afford it. They are buried quickly, with the hope that a simple offering and a prayer will suffice. Tomb robbing is common. Even centuries later, the bones of the poor are found jumbled, scattered, disturbed. The great pyramids were looted within generations. Sarcophagi stripped, amulets stolen, names chipped from stone. And with the name gone, the soul fades. The worst fate in Egypt is not torment. It is to be forgotten. Which is why so many sought to inscribe their names anywhere they could. On tombs. On offerings. On statues. Even on modest stelae and public shrines. To be named was to exist. And to be remembered by someone, even briefly, was to keep the flame of eternity alive. A good death, in this world, is not peaceful, it is visible. Well documented. carefully constructed. The idea of resting in peace is foreign here. Peace comes not from stillness, but from preparation. If you die unprepared, your soul wanders. If your name is never spoken again, your soul fades. The field of reeds is only open to those who pass the tests, who bring their tools, who speak the words, who carry the correct amulets, who are buried according to custom. Even then, you still must work, still must serve, still must live. For someone from the modern world, where death is often sanitized, private, and quiet, this would be overwhelming. You are used to wills and obituaries, cremation or clean burials, moments of silence, and gentle remembrances. In Egypt, death is noisy, busy, ritualized, endless. It follows you through life and then asks more from you once you leave. There is no opting out, no restful void. Only another chapter, with as many expectations as the one before. And so, even as you lie down in the quiet heat of an ancient Egyptian night, you know this truth deep in your bones. When you die, the work is not over. It is just beginning. As you walk through an ancient Egyptian village, past the thatched courtyards, the dusty alleyways, the slow grind of daily life, you may begin to notice that not everyone moves with the same pace or posture. Some call out instructions while others listen. Some carry burdens while others watch. And while every class in Egypt is expected to work in some form, there is a quiet, often invisible line between labor that is done out of duty and labor that is demanded without choice. To understand why you wouldn't last a day in this world, you must also understand the ones at the very bottom, those whose lives are not their own, whose names are rarely remembered, whose hands built the greatness of Egypt while their faces remained in shadow. The lives of servants and slaves. Slavery in ancient Egypt did not always look like the brutal chattel slavery of later empires, but it was still bondage. People could be born into it, sold into it, or taken as captives during war. Debt slavery was common. Families who could not repay taxes or loans might sell a child or relative into temporary servitude. Foreigners captured in military campaigns, particularly from Nubia or the Levant, were brought back not just as prisoners, but as property, used to labor in estates, temples, and royal households. A slave in ancient Egypt was not considered fully human in the legal sense. They could not marry without permission, could not own land, and had no recourse if mistreated. If you were assigned to a wealthy household, your day began well before sunrise. You might wake on a mat tucked near the animals or in a separate structure beside the family's compound. There would be no privacy, no comfort, and no quiet. You would begin by starting fires, sweeping the courtyard, fetching water, and preparing the morning meal for the family before your own hunger was ever considered. The household might include scribes, priests, merchants, people of standing who demanded exact obedience and expected your labor to be invisible. The better you performed, the less you were noticed. The less you were noticed, the safer you were. Your tasks were endless and thankless. You ground grain, pounded laundry, scoured cooking pots, mixed perfumes, bathed children, brushed hair, fed livestock, slaughtered poultry, polished sandals, mended linens. If your master was a noble or priest, you might be assigned to accompany them to temples or festivals, standing silently by, always alert. You did not speak unless spoken to. Your eyes were expected to lower in deference. And if you displeased someone, the punishment came swiftly. Beatings, confinement, or being sold again. You had no say in your fate. You could be traded, gifted, or passed down through inheritance, your personhood itemized like a clay pot or bronze mirror. In some households, particularly among the elite, slaves or bonded servants were trained to specific roles. A young girl might be taught to play the harp, becoming a household musician for the rest of her life. A boy might be taught to brew beer or manage storerooms. Some became trusted enough to act as messengers or attendants. But even those who lived in closer proximity to power were still bound by silence, expected to know their place, and reminded often of their role. Elevation did not mean freedom. It only meant new forms of control. Life in the temple complex was no easier. The great temples of Ammonius, Ta, or Hathor employed hundreds, if not thousands, of workers, many of them bound in lifelong service. They toiled in the kitchens, storerooms, stables, and laundry chambers. They prepared sacrificial animals, tended to sacred gardens, and carried offerings. While the priests performed chants in polished robes, it was the servants who fetched the water, who lit the incense, who cleaned the floors after the rituals were done. And unlike the priests, they were not entitled to rations of meat or wine. They ate what was left. Or sometimes, nothing at all. Some laborers were assigned to state projects, stone quarries, royal tombs, or canal systems. These were not always slaves by name, but the conditions were much the same. They worked under overseers with staffs, carried baskets of rubble up endless ramps, drank water from shared clay jugs, and collapsed from exhaustion under the unforgiving sun. Injuries were common. Medical care was basic. Replacement was easy. If you could no longer lift, you were no longer needed. There was no compensation, no rest, no relief. Just dismissal, and sometimes abandonment. You may be tempted to imagine that these lives were miserable beyond measure. But the truth is more complex. Many servants formed deep bonds with the families they served. Some were eventually granted partial freedom. Others were buried in the same family tombs, with their names etched into the stone in smaller script. These were not the majority, but they existed, testaments to the blurry lines that formed when generations grew up under the same roof. A nursemaid who raised a child might be mourned with deep sincerity. A loyal servant might be included in prayers. But inclusion did not erase inequality. It only softened it with sentiment. And what of resistance? Could you protest your treatment? Rarely. Rebellion was dangerous. Complaints might be ignored or punished. The social structure in Egypt was based on ma'at, the belief in harmony and order. To speak against your role was to speak against the balance of the world. Servants were expected to be humble, silent, diligent. Their best hope was obedience and the possibility of spiritual reward in the afterlife. For even in death, the system persisted. A servant might be buried with miniature shabby figures, symbols of the work they would continue to do on the other side. Work was not left behind. It followed you. And yet, there was dignity. Among themselves, servants formed tight communities. They helped one another with chores, whispered jokes under their breath, sang work songs as they washed or scrubbed. Stories were passed down, tales of clever slaves who outwitted cruel masters, of household spirits who punished those who abused the innocent. These stories were not just entertainment. They were hope. Still, for someone from the modern world, someone who values privacy, freedom, and bodily autonomy, the idea of living this way would be unbearable. To have no say in where you live, what you wear, what task you are given, or even whether you can rest. To be punished for a mistake you didn't make. To be silenced. To be owned. Because in ancient Egypt, even greatness required sacrifice. And often, that sacrifice came from those who had no choice. You would not last a day in their place. Not because you couldn't work, but because you would expect thanks, rights, recognition. And in this world, those things were not guaranteed. They were earned, over generations. Or never earned at all. In a world so thoroughly bound to structure, tradition, and the sacred rhythm of ma'at, to be an outsider in ancient Egypt was to live on the edges of acceptance, tolerated perhaps, useful at times, but never truly safe. It is one thing to be born poor in Egypt, to know your station, to understand the rules from the inside. But to arrive here as a foreigner, a stranger with unfamiliar speech, strange gods, different skin, and no ancestral ties to the Nile, is to live each moment under watchful eyes, under assumptions you cannot erase, and under rules that were not made for you. You can be used, you can be feared, you can even be valued. But you will never fully belong. If you, a modern traveler, woke one day and found yourself in Thebes or Memphis, not as a native Egyptian but as a foreigner dropped into this intricate and ancient machine, you would be overwhelmed not only by the climate, the customs, and the language, but by your visibility. You would be noticed instantly. Perhaps your skin is lighter or darker, or your manner of walking different. Perhaps your tunic is unfamiliar, your hair unshaved, your sandals cut in a style not common to locals. You speak with the wrong vowels. Your accent betrays you in every sentence. And in ancient Egypt, these things are not charming. They are unsettling. Egyptians viewed themselves as a chosen people, not in the sense of arrogance, but of divine design. Their land was the center of the world, bounded by deserts on both sides, blessed by the ever-returning Nile, and anchored by temples where gods literally walked the earth in statue form. The land outside Egypt was dangerous, unpredictable. It produced enemies, traitors, and the dead, but not equals. Foreign lands were called the Nine Bows, a phrase that grouped all outsiders under one symbolic banner of submission. The enemies of Egypt were often shown in art kneeling beneath the sandals of the pharaoh, their arms bound, their heads bowed, their features exaggerated, their skin colored to signify their difference. To be from elsewhere was not simply to be unknown. It was to be lesser. This worldview was not purely xenophobic, it was reinforced by experience. Raids from the deserts, attacks from the sea, migrants arriving during times of famine, speaking unfamiliar dialects, asking for food, shelter, work. Some were welcomed as laborers or mercenaries. Others were viewed as threats. Egypt had long memories of invasion, and it built its cities with an inward gaze, wary of the borders, watchful of the gates. If you arrived in this world as a foreigner, especially from the Levant, Nubia, Libya, or later the Aegean, you would likely be directed into service immediately. You might become a soldier, placed in a mixed unit under Egyptian commanders, or a servant in a noble household, assigned the more grueling and demeaning tasks. You would not speak during meals. You would not worship in the inner courtyards. You would be allowed to live, but not to belong. And if you were captured in war, your fate would be darker still. Foreign captives were brought back to Egypt as war trophies, displayed in victory processions, sometimes blinded or maimed to prevent escape. They might be gifted to temples, set to work hauling stone or grinding grain in the hot sun, their lives shortened by toil, and their memories forgotten before the dust of the battlefield had even settled. Children of these captives might be absorbed into Egyptian culture, renamed, taught the language, and slowly assimilated, but they would carry the mark of their origin for generations. Outsider status clings like river mud. It doesn't wash off easily. Yet, paradoxically, Egypt also needed its foreigners. Traders from distant lands brought valuable items: incense from Punt, silver from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Egyptian priests and scribes recorded these exchanges in great detail, noting the names of foreign rulers, sketching their ships and animals, even listing the contents of their tribute. Diplomacy was possible, especially in the New Kingdom, when Egypt corresponded with the great empires of the ancient world through tablets written in Akkadian. But this diplomacy never erased the feeling of Egyptian superiority. The foreigners may visit, trade, offer gifts, but they were always guests, never family. There were rare exceptions. Foreigners who proved their loyalty might rise through the ranks. A skilled Nubian archer might become commander of a border outpost. A Canaanite merchant might gain favor at court by offering rare perfumes or exotic animals. There were even pharaohs, like the Hyksos kings, who rose from foreign origins and ruled parts of Egypt for generations. But they were remembered with suspicion, their legacy rewritten, their monuments defaced after their defeat. Their rule was seen not as a partnership, but as a period of disgrace. Religion offered some measure of inclusion. If you adopted the gods of Egypt, followed the rituals, spoke the prayers correctly. Some foreign workers, particularly those brought in to help build temples or transport sacred goods, converted fully to Egyptian belief. They shaved their heads, wore linen, swore by the names of Ammonius and Osiris. But even then, they remained from elsewhere. The temple might accept their offerings. Their neighbors might tolerate their presence. But in moments of crisis or famine, they would be the first suspected of impurity, of theft, of angering the gods. If you were a woman, foreignness added another layer of complexity. You might be exoticized, your features admired, your clothing imitated. Egyptian men might take foreign wives or concubines, especially among the wealthy elite. But even in such unions, the power was uneven. Your lineage would be recorded with an asterisk. Your children might be seen as legitimate, but your influence in the household would be limited. You could be beautiful, even desirable, but rarely trusted. And in death, your outsider status followed you still. Egyptian burial customs were precise, deeply ritualized, and rooted in ancestral memory. If you died in this land, would your body be treated according to your own customs, or theirs? Would your name be preserved, your soul remembered, your heart weighed with fairness? Or would you be buried without a priest, without a scroll, without a tomb, beneath the foreign dust that never quite settles? For someone from the modern world, who travels freely, who expects visas, borders, and embassies, this world would be jarring. You could not move anonymously. You could not reinvent yourself. You could not blend in. Every gesture would be scrutinized. Every word measured. You would be tolerated if useful. But the rules would never quite be written for you. Your difference would not be celebrated. It would be managed. Because in ancient Egypt, the world is structured, bound, layered with meaning. And the Nile does not ask where you came from, only whether you understand who you are in relation to it. And for a foreigner, that place is never at the center. By now, you've walked through the dust-covered homes, stood beneath the shadow of towering temples, eaten from shared bowls, worked under the punishing sun, endured sleepless nights, illness, hunger, ritual, and rule. You've seen what it takes to survive in ancient Egypt, not just the physical endurance, but the mental and spiritual alignment with a society that asks more from you than just labor. It asks for belief, for obedience, for harmony. But what might surprise you most, after all of this, is not how hard it is to live in ancient Egypt, but how hard it is to change. Because Egypt is not a culture of reinvention. It is a culture of continuity. The walls that rise today are built in the image of those from centuries past. The chants that echo in temple halls are spoken with the same inflections as the ones your great-grandmother heard. The gods do not evolve. The rituals do not bend. The stories do not shift to fit the times. In Egypt, time does not move forward as you know it. It circles. It flows like the Nile, rising, retreating, returning, always dependable, always familiar. And if you are someone who lives in a world of updates, reinvention, choice, and flexibility, this alone would be enough to make you unravel. You wake to the same sunrise, greeted by the same sky. The temple bells ring at the same hour. The duties of your class are unchanged, as are the expectations. Your father was a field worker, and so are you. Your daughter will learn to grind grain just as your mother did. The tools may be patched, but they do not innovate. The basket, the kiln, the plow, the loom, all are crafted the same way they've been for centuries. There is no push for better, faster, sleeker. The shape of a pot is the same today as it was 5 dynasties ago, and no one questions it. When stories are told, they are not new. They are old myths with known endings, spoken to reinforce, not to surprise. The tale of Isis searching for Osiris, the voyage of Ra through the underworld, the judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, you know them before you are old enough to recite your own name. But no one asks for new interpretations. These stories do not evolve. They are recited not to provoke imagination, but to preserve the balance. Creativity exists in Egypt, but it is the creativity of precision, not experimentation. A new twist in a necklace pattern. A more detailed flourish in a painted lotus. Innovation within the bounds of respect for tradition. This unchanging rhythm is sacred. It brings order, comfort, but it also brings weight. The weight of a life with few possibilities, few exits, few reimaginings. If you are born into a certain class, you will stay there. If your family is bound to a temple, so will you be. If you live in a village of fishermen, your children will sail the same stretches of river, casting nets from the same carved boats. This is not questioned. Ambition, in the modern sense, is alien. It is not considered noble to wish for more. It is considered disorderly, disruptive, dangerous. Even the calendar is circular. Each year is divided into 3 seasons, Ake, the season of flooding, Parate, the season of planting, and Shimu, the season of harvest. These repeat with the rise and fall of the Nile. Time is marked by festivals, moon phases, the appearance of the star Sirius. You measure life not by novelty, but by return. The day of the flood. The time of the sowing. The festival of Opet. Again and again, endlessly repeating. And within this cycle you find comfort, but not momentum. If you are young and restless, there is little room for rebellion. There is no open path for you to leave your village and become something new. The cities are closed to wanderers. The priesthood is guarded. The scribal schools are reserved for the sons of scribes. You may dream, but you do not pursue. To pursue something beyond your role is to risk not just your own fate, but the balance of the whole. Your life is a thread in a sacred tapestry. To tug at it is to fray the divine. And yet, this static world persists for millennia. The pyramids you glimpse as a farmer working the fields were built by people who believed almost exactly what you do now. The names on the tombs have changed, but the stories on the walls are familiar. The tools, the pottery, the fabrics, the prayers, almost all are the same. Egypt is, perhaps more than any other ancient civilization, a place that actively resists the erosion of time. It survives by refusing to bend. And for the Egyptians themselves, this is not limitation. It is achievement. In a world where neighboring kingdoms collapse, where nomads starve, where invaders rage and fall, Egypt remains. Not because it changes, but because it refuses to. But to you, from a world where progress is celebrated, where innovation is identity, where each generation remakes itself in new language and technology, this is suffocating. The walls close in, not from cruelty, but from certainty. There is no reinvention here. No starting over. No second act. If you are born poor, you die poor. If you are born female, your path is narrow and well-trodden. If you are born sickly, you pray for healing, but there are no doctors who can rewrite your fate. And if you are born curious, if you ask why, what if, what else, you are gently, firmly told, that is not our way. And perhaps you believe it for a while. Perhaps the rhythm comforts you, the way the sun always rises in the same part of the sky, the way the water always returns to the fields, the way the priests always speak with the same chants and the same incense. Perhaps you stop questioning. You begin to repeat what you hear. You begin to believe that stillness is peace. That obedience is wisdom. That tradition is truth. But deep inside, the modern part of you, trained to seek, to explore, to reinvent, will start to ache. You will look at the painted walls and wish for something unseen. You will wake in the middle of the night not in fear, but in yearning. For possibility. For choice. For a path not yet walked. And you will find none. Because in ancient Egypt, the future does not arrive. It returns. And you are expected not to shape it, but to honor it. And now, as we leave the land of ancient Egypt behind, let your breath soften and your thoughts begin to drift. The long roads of sand, the quiet river, the flickering oil lamps, they all fade gently into the dark. You've walked among workers and priests, nobles and nameless souls, and seen a world where time stood still, yet life never paused. If you're still awake, I hope this journey has brought you a little stillness. And if you've already fallen asleep, may your dreams carry you far beyond the Nile's edge. Into quiet places where time is your own, and the past no longer presses. Thank you for spending your evening with me. Good night, and sleep well.